Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink, I have in sample form. It's by Private Reserve, Plum. Yep, this actually looks a lot like the little plums that grow on the trees outside my aunt's house. They've got leaves practically this color as well, and of course, because you can't eat them because they're horribly sour, they end up falling on people's cars, and then they leave bright stains this color. So, yeah. I definitely do associate it with plums, but not any kind that are yummy. Anyways, moving on. Two pens I used were these. This is a Pilot Metropolitan with a Japanese fine nib. And it is so fine, it's like trying to write with a quarter of a razor blade, and I may have scratched through the paper more than once on this test. Anyways, next up is a JinHao X450, and I love my X450s because they tend to be pretty broad and pretty wet, and this one definitely is. See all the Noodlers Park Red in there. Yep. Alrighty, now, like I usually do in these situations, I would like to, in the matter of full disclosure, admit that I hate pink. I hate it. I hate pink. I do. And it's not because of some like internalized misogyny or whatever. It's just the fact that I am a girl and people have given me pink my whole life, despite the fact that it is a horribly unflattering color on me. Because all girl things are pink. And it's been a slow building hatred. So I hate pink. However, a lot of people don't hate pink, and this is such an intense shade of pink. If that's what you're going for, I think you hit the mother lode. So here we are. Private Reserve, Plum. Is it pink? Is it magenta? It could be both. Now, comparisons. Plum. Diamine's, well, I've always called it claret because I'm a horribly uncivilized American, but I'm sure it's claret. Noodler's Swaro Wine, like the cactus. I don't think I've ever seen that color associated with cactus, but Noodler's Cactus Fruit. I feel like these are horribly similar, but they are slightly different. I feel like this is sort of right between the two. Yep. And lastly, Diamine's Deep Magenta, which, much like Diamine's Dark Brown, is a lie. Horrible lie of a name. Anyways, this is like Barbie pink on acid. But yeah, it's bright pink. It's a bit lighter. But this being Private Reserve, Plum's a bit richer. More intense. Now, hang on as I zoom in. Alrighty, Chromatography. Now, this one on the right with a little D is the one that I let dry. Now, the way I usually do this is I draw a line of ink and then instantly dump this one in the water. And then as soon as all this is dry, I then dunk this. Usually takes about 8 to 10 minutes. Now, yeah, like a lot of Private Reserve inks, not all of them, but there are definitely some that just do not resist the water. Which is nice, because Private Reserve tends to be a very saturated ink. More saturated inks tend to be a bit harder to clean out of your pens. This one was not. Just water. Not even an absorbent amount of water. On a scale of like 1 to 10, hardest inks to clean, I'd probably call it like a 2. Not the easiest, but definitely up there. Now, as you can see, you can barely make out where that line was initially. Barest little hints of something. Up, 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 up. And then we start to see this like Easter pastel pink, and then we get into like Barbie pink, and then we get into this near magenta up the top. Now, the one that I let dry, very, very similar. I'd say this is like a hair's breadth darker down here, but if anything, I feel like it was more of a solid push. Like, this is a little more spread out, but here I feel like it's much more condensed. But yeah, so it's Easter pastel pink, Barbie pink on acid, magenta. Yeah, so there's that. Chemical tests. Yep. As you can see, water really, really got it moving. But essentially what you do when you add water is you're rehydrating ink that is dried, especially on Rhodia like this, where a lot of it just sits on the top. So yeah, I just moved the ink around before softening it up. However, 1/3 bleach solution, you'd be hard pressed to tell that it was there. There's not even like the vague hint of like a off-white color. It is just straight gone. Ammonia pen flush really got it moving, but not more so than water, except for the fact that it started to react with the paper, as you can probably tell. Hydrogen peroxide, again, just sort of reacted weird with the paper and the ink, and definitely caused some weirdness. And again, for the record, I do not ever condone cleaning out your pen with hydrogen peroxide. That is a forgery resistance test thing that I made up myself, because I don't think I've ever heard of anyone trying to use hydrogen peroxide, but it was the only odd solvent thing I had in the house. Anyways, moving on. Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. Yep, oh my god, it's pink. Anyways, magenta-ish. It's more magenta where it's laid on thick, but it's not laid on thick everywhere. But yeah, this is a very wet flowing ink, or at least my sample was, as you could probably tell by that smear, because that went about 4 boxes and change. Now yes, that's the X450, which I even note all across the top. It's fairly broad, fairly wet. However, holy wow. Now, as people know, one of my pet peeves is I don't like being able to see the lines of the quadrilateral paper through the ink. And though you can kind of make it out in some areas, this ink is so vibrant you would be hard-pressed to not be able to let those lines fade into the background. So, yeah, holy moly. Now, we do get a dark halo effect around the wettest parts, which is something that I enjoy. It increases contrast, makes it easier to read. We especially see that in the scrubby, and I hope this, hope this comes up on camera. No, we only got a little bit of it, but there in the corner we can see a gold halo sheen, which is something that happens, and it happens in the writing as well. It's just usually easier to get it in the scrubby. But yeah, anyways, that Japanese fine took 7 seconds to dry. The X450 took 29, and yeah, God, this is just such an intense color. There's no bleed, no feather, no spread. There's no echo, really. And the water resistance is pretty much not. Especially that fine. It just did not put down enough ink to remain. It definitely dyed the page. And this has become Barbie pink. So if you get it wet, it will get lighter. And it will get more intense. And it will not remain. Like, we got 2/3 of the W's gone, part of the T, part of this T, E's pretty much gone, most of the S. Yeah, it's, don't buy it for the waterproofness. Buy it for the eye pain inducing vibrancy. Now, next up is Fabriano Echo Qua. It's an 85 gram per square meter paper. The more I use it, the more I enjoy it. Yep, God, it's pink. Anyways, yeah, intensely vibrant on here. We have a very distinct, oh come on, I know you wanna. Well, we have in real life a very distinct gold halo sheen effect going on, and we have it in the words as well. But it doesn't feel like showing up on camera today because that's just my luck. Yeah, it's an intense color. It's a very intense color, and we have noticeable shading, and we have a very distinct halo effect around the wettest parts. Yeah, the Japanese fine took 10 seconds to dry. Fairly broad and wet JinHao took 28. We do have shading even in the fine nib, which sometimes can be hard to notice, but it's there. And here's where I say this ink is definitely wet. I'd say it's a solid 7. Sometimes I felt like a 7.5. This ink was flying out of these pens. Yeah. But yeah, no bleed, no feather, no spread. No real echo. That was the scrubby. It was me laying it on real thick to try and make sure I could get some sheen on camera. And I feel like you can probably tell I don't know, I feel like the very fundamentalness of the color changes in the water effect. This is very much more of a flirts with purple magenta-y. This is just a bright, vibrant pink. The kind of pink that I hate. But yeah, it really dyed the page because, again, a lot of the ink sitting on top of the paper, add more water, you just rehydrate it. But again, the fine is really, really gone. The X450 just by sheer volume of ink it was putting down. A little bit more remains, but again, really patchy. That would not be easy to try and recover. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. Oddly, we don't have any sheen on here, which is odd, which is why I said oddly. But we do get a lot of shading. We do get a halo effect around the wettest parts. Yeah, so like pretty much it just didn't sheen. I'm not entirely sure why, but it didn't. Japanese fine took 11 seconds. The really brown wet JinHao took 28 and went clear off the page. But yeah, fairly well behaved, you know? I mean, it's Rhodia. No bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen, oddly, which I've said like 4 times by now. Again, water test made it a very bright, vibrant pink. Again, at least half of every letter is gone. The fine is mostly gone. However, I feel like this water test didn't dye the paper as much as the others, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was actually some of the ceramic coating, you know, that makes this ink so hydrophobic. Or, sorry, makes this paper so hydrophobic. But yeah, quite well behaved. Did pretty darn well for a pink. Anyways, I'm not biased, so I don't know what you're talking about. Anyways, Tomoe River, known for drawing out shading and sheen and dry times and echo, and we pretty much got all of that. Yeah, this is a cream colored paper as compared to the white of Clairefontaine and Rodya and the sort of like ivory of Fabriano. I don't know if it affected the color a great deal. I feel like it made it a little lighter, but I feel that has more to do with the way the paper works and not the color. But yeah, as you can probably see here, we have a very distinct halo effect, which is that dark outline around the wettest parts. And we have a lot of this gold halo sheen. Actually, the camera's barely picking up most of it, but yeah, it's there, and it's in the writing, all throughout the writing, pretty much anywhere you can see that dark outline. Yeah. Now, it did draw out the dry times. That fine, Japanese fine, took 18 seconds. Fairly brown wet JinHao took 35. But yeah, as I say here, there's no real bleed, feather, or spread. However, I was laying it on real thick because I was seeing some sheen in that bottom scrubby. You know, in both the scrubbies, and I wanted to make sure I would have enough to get on camera. So that is human error. That's why there's no real bleed. Yeah, we do have some echo. We definitely have some echo. And I think it's just because of how dark that halo effect can get around the wettest parts. It's almost not a problem at all with the fine. But yeah, it is there, something to, you know, to know going into it. Water test, it didn't dye the page very much, but it also didn't leave much behind. It's very faint, it's very light. In fact, the camera's darkening that up a bit. That would be hard to try and recover. And, I hope the camera will show this, that is not the light coming through the page. There is a very faint, like Easter pastel pink on the other side of the page corresponding with this. So, yeah, just thought I'd point that out. Next 3 tests, I only use the Japanese fine except to write the name. Now, this is the world's worst copier paper. This stuff is complete trash. I would almost be amused to set some kind of challenge to ask someone to find worse paper than this. But I won't. But it would be amusing. Anyways, we have no shading here at all. All shading is gone. 1.5 seconds to dry. And I just want to show you the intensity of this spread. Now, here is the Tomo River where there's no spread, and here is the copier paper. Look at just how much broader that line width got. That is intense. And we have lots of feathering, and yes, this is a very wet flowing ink. However, this is a Japanese fine. I would have thought that would have curbed it a little bit. Apparently not. Yeah, and it's just a mess. Now, I do want to point out, as you can probably tell, this part of the page doesn't have as much bleed as this part of the page. So I think this is the edge of the page. I just have to assume, because it's become environmentally affected. And so I just want to point that out. There is some areas that are much worse than others, but even the more well-behaved areas are kind of a mess. We got dots, we got darkness, and again, a Japanese fine. And this isn't the darkest shade of ink. This isn't like a blue-black. So, yeah. But anyways, water test, it freaked out. It feathered and exploded, and this looks like Grover's psychotic cousin, because that's just a furry little monster. That would be the opposite of fun to try and recover. Next up is Mead Notebook Paper. This is the kind you find in a spiral notebook, not the kind you'll find in a lab notebook. Lab notebook paper tends to feel more like newsprint. However, my stuff from the spiral notebook does tend to feather a lot, so go into it knowing that. However, I do want to show you that there isn't nearly as much spread as there was on the 20 pound. There's some, you can see, but it's sort of like a happy medium. So again, we have no shading at all. It's just this almost magenta pink. 2.5 seconds to dry. We do have feathering, but as I said, that is something that my Mead spiral notebook paper was particularly sensitive to. And you know where I said I could not confirm or deny whether or not I had scratched through the paper because of the fineness of that Japanese fine nib? This would be the moment where you should probably challenge me on that, because that's insane. Anyways, yes, it was wet flowing, but I mean, for the most part, we get hints of stuff on the other side, but you can see how opaque and pale it remains, and that means it didn't even make it to this side of the page, never mind not on the page below. I will not discuss that particular little bit of the scrubby. Yep. So, water test, this paper does tend to absolutely freak out when you add water, and if I hold this still enough, I think you can see the line of demarcation where the water stopped, because it just affected the entire texture and makeup of the paper. But yeah, this turned psychedelic Barbie pink and exploded, and if you can call that cursive, started to overlap. It was ugly, and it started completely coming out the back. That would be not fun to try and recover. Now lastly is Moleskine notebook paper, which I hate because it's expensive and it's terrible, and that should not be two things that one thing has in common. But yes, even though it was wet flowing, and even though the nib was so fine it was almost sharp, I would not have expected results quite this bad from a Japanese fine, but I am learning to lower my standards yet again. 4 seconds to dry. You can see the pulp that they mashed into paper. It's crazy woolliness, intense, ugly feathering, just nasty looking. And unlike the Mead, which I pointed out stays very pale and opaque, here you can see nearly all of the dots are extremely dark. Now what does that mean? As I was inferring, not only did it make it to this side of the page, so soaked all the way through the paper, it also dotted the page below, which means I had to put up with pink on my guide paper. Freaking pink. Anyways, that's a personal issue. Yeah, paper freaked out because it's Moleskine. It just can't handle anything ever. I wrote that and I could barely tell you what letters are which. That would be terrible to try and recover. Somebody showed me like pages and pages of that and said, okay, I need you to translate this for me. I would have been like, no, you know what, I resign. Anyways, there you go. There is Private Reserve's Plum. It is a near magenta. It does personally remind me of plums, but in not in a yummy way. But yeah, it is, God, it is pink. It is so pink. Anyways, if you like pink, and if you like magenta, and if you like Noodler Swirl Wine, or Diamine's Claret, or Claret, or Cactus Fruit, you know, you're in good company. So, there you go. So wet flowing. Can't handle water at all. But, so not my ink, but not a bad ink. It's just not for me. You know, we all have our own thing. I know people who hate brown. I did. I hated brown for ages, and now it's one of my favorite colors of ink. But anyways, here you go for your consideration from the Triple N Network. Private Reserve Plum. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.